Hello summoners and welcome back to a new video where today we have a video talking about Riven, my favorite champion in League of Legends, talking about how good she is currently in the state of top lane. Right now, Riven is an interesting champion. Many people may say that she is overpowered, while others might say that she's not even the best bruiser or AD fighter in this current meta. With the rise of tanks coming back into the game, but also the introduction of the new Conqueror rune and Spear of Sojin, Riven's state is something that is not only interesting and undetermined, but also dear to my heart, as she is my favorite champion in League of Legends. Let's assess her today and talk about her current state in this meta. Firstly, one thing that is super cool to note on this patch is that Riven's visual effects got some love. The look of her abilities on her older skins, such as the default Riven skin, the Battle Bunny skin, Redeemed, and Crimson Elite have all been upgraded to reach modern standards. For her Q, each separate Q now has its own visual distinctive effect, making the area of the damage extremely clear and no longer potentially ambiguous. For her W, the stun now brings a quick but clear small green explosion around Riven. For her E, the hitbox for the shield is clearer and visually brighter, bringing the visual effects closer to today's champions, and for her ultimate, more emphasis to the glow and the power of her sword during her ultimate, effectively showing the range of Wind Slash through a more unified animation. Random particles that appeared when initially pressing R are cleaned up, and Riven's passive, when her passive is active, her sword will now glow green. These effects fit very well thematically to the champion Riven, emphasizing the green color scheme and visualizing the power of her sword to fit every single one of her abilities. Interestingly, and good for Riven mains, no animations have actually been changed in accordance with her gameplay, which means that your animation cancels and your stuns and your fast combos will all still be perfectly fine. As for the new Conqueror rune, it's good on Riven. Riven loves AD, true damage, and healing. However, the lack of the 20% true damage now and the buffs recently to tanks does actually make the tank matchups a bit harder, but not necessarily impossible. I'm sure you guys are seeing more and more Maokai and Singed right now, and that's for a good reason. All hope is not lost for Riven though, and I suggest that you just adjust your build path accordingly and look at Black Cleaver and Lord Dominik's Regards as a serious build option. At the end of Season 8 and early Season 9, many Rivens were rushing Essence Reaver into Stormrazor, which is not really possible anymore. That build is extremely squishy, you don't have the extra true damage on your Conqueror, and Essence Reaver is now a little bit worse in Spear of Sojin, which we will talk about in just a second, and Stormrazor is no longer a viable option on Riven. Both Black Cleaver and Lord Dominik's Regards are great for tank shredding, and quite honestly with the old Conqueror, again, it wasn't really necessary to use these items due to the shred with the keystone. It's necessary to compensate now with the changes. Where I also really like the new Conqueror and where it can really shine is in jungle and river skirmishes and fights, because now you can get immediate use out of it from the adaptive force it gives you. With the old Conqueror, you were forced to wait 4 seconds to get a keystone, but now with Riven, that immediate and upfront damage is really useful, and I would say this is better designed for her overall than someone like Darius, who probably preferred the old Conqueror since he had a bleed anyway to keep him in combat. Riven is definitely still her old self though. As you can see, when Adrian plays Riven, his snowballing score is extremely high, well into the 90s. So on his GPI, you can actually check out how he typically performs on Riven, which is really cool to see just how much he snowballs his lead once he gets one. Also, because Riven is a carry champion in the top lane, you need to make sure that your farming skills are really high if you want to play her, and that's why you can see on guys like Adrian's profile, he really will have a high farming score in his GPI, having well into the 90s once again for his early game farming, his general income. He definitely is an efficient farmer and does really well in the income category, so make sure that you're keeping up those gold numbers. The next question is about Spear of Sojin. Should you actually build this item? Well, when Spear was first introduced on the PBE in the patch notes, myself and others expected this to push Riven into S+ tier, as it seemed to have everything Riven really wants. However, once trying it out on the main server, it definitely is nerfed compared to the old Essence Reaver, as the old Reaver was much cheaper and had more AD. However, all hope is not lost because once completed, this item is deadly as a late game item. I would never recommend you to build it first item, but as a third, fourth, or even fifth option, I still think it's viable. If you do want to build it early because you're snowballing, I personally like the Death Dance into Spear of Sojin path, which gives you enough AD and sustained damage to continue your snowball, and that 30 CDR and health allows you to not get shut down as easily. Of course, both of these items are extremely expensive, which is why I only recommend this in a best case scenario when you have piles of gold. As for Riven tips with the new rune, try out max stacking it yourself in the practice tool first. There are a couple ways to do it. Remember that you need 5 abilities and or auto attacks to reach your full Conqueror stack, so utilizing Riven's combos such as the double cast, Hydra animation cancels, and all 3 Qs weaving in auto attacks will mean that you can stack it much faster. The goal in perfect scenario is for you to be able to fully proc your Conqueror first and have it ready before throwing your Wind Slash, as the massive damage it does will not only increase because of your adaptive force and true damage, but then it will also heal you. Couple this with the Triumph healing, you will easily be winning 1v2s soon enough. Alright, let's end today's video with a conclusion. Right now, I think with the current state of the game, the new Conqueror rune, tanks coming back, but also the introduction of Spear of Sojin, I think Riven perfectly sits right in or around S tier, or maybe A tier for low elos, but let's say if you're good at Riven, around S tier. The reason I say this is not because Riven is a perfect champion. In fact, as a Riven main, I'll go ahead and help you guys out. If you want to counterpick Riven, things you can play are things like Singed, Kellen, Jace, Quinn, and some mages top can be kind of tough, things like Lissandra as well. Matchups like these, mages, and specifically Trundle as well can all be tough, and that is why Riven is not a totally perfect champion, but remember that during a climb, you will not play versus all of these types of champions every single game, and that's important to note, is that if you're consistently banning Singed as a Riven player, you will be playing against things that are extremely popular like Jax, Darius, Fiora, and Yasuo, and you win a lot of those matchups. Because Riven does beat a lot of other bruisers, that's why she can sit comfortably in S tier, because people play bruisers and not necessarily tanks like Maokai or Singed into you every single game, especially if you're banning them like we just said. That's why I like Riven right now as a meta pick. However, it is worth noting that Riven's power does have a lot to do with the current state of Conqueror and what that gives her. I actually would argue that Riven is much closer to fair and not necessarily S tier if she's taking things like Spellbook or Electrocute, Comet, Aftershock. That actually feels like a very fair version of Riven, but I would say with Conqueror it does feel more unfair and she wins 1v2s and 1v3s a little bit too easily. Anyway, those are just my thoughts on Riven. Let us know in the comment section down below what you guys think of Riven. Are you a Riven hater? Are you a Riven player? Do you main her or do you ban her? What is your state on Riven right now? Anyway, use the product at mobalytics.gg, your all-in-one platform for improving in League of Legends.